Welcome to another Zcash Foundation community call. Today, we're going to be meeting the two newest members of the Zcash Foundation's board, J.W. Verret and Marta Belcher. Let's plunge straight in, and I'll ask Marta to start off by introducing herself. What's your background? How did you end up getting involved in crypto? And what enticed you to get involved with Zcash?
Hi, yes, I'm so excited to be here and just so thrilled. Could not be more thrilled to be one of the newest members of the Zcash Foundation board. So I am a cryptocurrency and civil liberties attorney. I was previously focusing on technology and civil liberties as an attorney, and in 2015 got involved in cryptocurrency primarily because I was interested in the ways in which it could import the civil liberties of benefits of cash into the online world. I was in private practice for a long time at Ropes and Gray, focusing on cryptocurrency issues. And then I went to Protocol Labs, first as the general counsel, first as outside general counsel, then as in-house general counsel and head of policy, was part of the team that launched Filecoin and was the person who was put in charge of going and launching the Filecoin Foundation. So I also launched the Filecoin Foundation, am the president and chair of the Filecoin Foundation, and also launched at the same time a 501c3 charitable organization called the Filecoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web, where I'm also the president and chair. In addition to that, I've been doing a ton of policy work in the cryptocurrency space, mostly focused on privacy and civil liberties. So things like testifying in Congress, state legislatures, especially about issues that relate to privacy. I am actually special counsel at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I am also on the board of the Blockchain Association and heavily involved in policy efforts in the cryptocurrency space. Could not be more thrilled to be here and be a member of the Zcash Foundation board and part of the broader Zcash community.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board. It's fantastic to have both yourself and JW join the board. JW, do you want to introduce yourself for the audience?
Sure, thanks, Jack. Really appreciate that, and good to be here with you, with Marta, with the team from ZF. A little bit about my background: I teach banking law, securities law, and corporate law and accounting, forensic accounting at George Mason Law School. I guess kind of in simple terms, I'm a libertarian banking law professor, which is a depressing thing to be. I describe myself that way in a crypto privacy debate I had with some central bank people from IMF and stuff, and they all laughed like, "Oh, libertarian banking law professor, that must be depressing." To which I responded, "Well, if we get crypto right, every fight that I've lost in banking regulation won't matter anymore." And they stopped laughing immediately. The room got kind of awkward. So I'm really drawn to crypto for a lot of reasons, and to the privacy space and to the Zcash community. I guess one of the things that I do is forensic accounting work to help defendants in money laundering, wire fraud, sort of prosecutions. And some securities enforcement defense work. I help defendants. So I see government overreach. I see government tracing of funds. When you see up close the AML military industrial complex, I guess the BSA industrial complex, when you see it up close and you see the impacts on real people and clients, how could you not be excited about what Zcash is doing, right? And how can you not be committed to the idea that privacy is normal? So I came to this as a lawyer with limited technical knowledge, almost none. So I'm just here to help, try to be useful, try to defend the community if I can. So I'm here to do that, and I'm learning a lot from the team at ZF. I'm learning a lot from everybody in our community, trying to listen, trying to learn, trying to be useful. And I'm just so excited and thrilled to be, a year ago, I was learning how to do shielded transactions and really excited about it. And now I get to be here with the ZF team. So it's just a real treat for me. So please tell me how I can be helpful.
Well, both of you are lawyers, and with you guys joining, with Peter already on the board, we now have 3 lawyers on the board, and I'm quite comfortable with that. I think that's a great thing to have in the current climate. And I guess as a first kind of question, and let's throw it to you, Jay. Where do you see the current climate with regards to both cryptocurrency in general and specifically privacy preserving cryptocurrencies like Zcash going over, say, the coming year? Because we've seen some really interesting developments over the past few months that kind of hint that there's a certain agenda in place in the corridors of power in Washington and other places where regulators operate. And I just wanted to get both your perspective on where you think that's going over, say, the coming year.
Yeah, there was some optimism a year and a half ago about in the United States about the Biden executive order, and I was always kind of a pessimist because I've just seen the post-Dodd in the United States, the post-Dodd-Frank environment on financial regulation is just not one that is pro-innovation at all. I mean, it's just not possible. So I had hopes. My version of optimism was that Biden achieves nothing in crypto and just we just have to deal with the SEC and try to fight them. That was my best case scenario. Obviously, it's a lot worse than that at this point. The White House is actively involved in supporting the Choke Point 2.0 effort. I've never seen the National Economic Council of the White House issue a release about bank examination, but they did in support, along with the regulatory guidance that really kind of started the wave of this Choke Point 2.0 phenomenon, which I think is a pretty accurate description of it. So what does that mean for us? I think we are very lucky in that, or not lucky, y'all were very smart in how you set up everything with no pre-mine, with multiple entities, with decentralization, with no, with care and caution, and obviously a lot of good legal advice. So that's going to continue to reap benefits for this community, I think. And so good work for you, Jack and Zuko and everybody at ECC and ZF. Y'all were really smart about how everything got started. And so that's going to continue to reap benefits for us. Obviously, no one's perfectly safe, but on the list of targets from SEC and other regulators, we're so low that we're pretty well protected. Obviously, we need to continue to be careful, but we're in a very good place on that. Obviously, the Tornado Cash sanction is worrisome. We're in a different place on that, but post ZSAs, the risk probably goes up. It's worth it, but it still goes up. So it's something we have to think very carefully about and continue to decentralize, continue to work really hard to decentralize. And we're already doing it, I know, with the growth of CCG and then the build out of multiple grants programs, small grants programs. And I'm really excited to see what happens with Jason McGee's efforts to create a Swiss organization. But the more we can decentralize, the better. And when I meet people that want advice about what to do, I say compliance is hard because the regulators aren't acting in good faith. And to be honest, the best, it's not legal advice, just kind of personal advice. And you already know this. Build anonymously if you can. I mean, just try to stay anon. Don't dox yourself. I mean, I can dox myself because I'm already. I mean, my only value is as a doxed spokesman. But if you can stay anon, do it and be careful about it. I think that's really important too. So, hope that makes sense. We're in trouble, but we've got a lot of weapons to defend ourselves. And I know Marta's done a lot more work for advocacy for freedom and liberty. I'm interested to hear what she thinks about the fight ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Marta.
Sure, absolutely. So, what we've been seeing for the last few years has really been this expansion of the mass surveillance of the traditional financial system onto cryptocurrency. And I think we're at this really interesting inflection point in that battle for a couple of reasons. So first of all, I personally believe that the mass surveillance that we've seen in traditional financial systems, just from a United States perspective, is unconstitutional. What we've seen is massive amounts of our financial data being turned over to the government by default without a warrant, which is really quite shocking, but somehow has become completely normalized over time. And a lot of people just take for granted the idea that like, it's totally fine that our data, the data about citizens, is being turned over to the government by default. In my view, that is clearly unconstitutional and not something that should be happening. The reason that it's been able to happen is something called the third-party doctrine. So the idea of the third-party doctrine is any information you hand over to a third party, you lose your reasonable expectation of privacy in that data. And so that is the sort of giant loophole that has just blown a giant hole in the Fourth Amendment, where it is suddenly okay for all of these transactions to be handed over to the government through programs like the Bank Secrecy Act that Jay mentioned. And this has been, again, completely normalized. So where we are in that is a really interesting point. So like where we are at this moment in time. So on the one hand, in the last few years, in the last decade, really, we've seen the Supreme Court really chipping away at the third-party doctrine in the United States and basically saying, look, that might have been true. It might have been true that you lose your reasonable expectation of privacy in data you turn over to third parties back in the 70s when this doctrine was developed. But now the information, we live our entire lives with third parties, right? Like literally every second, our phone companies, our email providers, everyone, like we're at all times, we're sending data to third parties. And so the Supreme Court has really begun to chip away at that. Nonetheless, so I do think that if we were to challenge the surveillance that happens under the traditional banking system up at the Supreme Court level, I really believe there's a good shot that the Supreme Court would actually say, yeah, actually what's happening right now in terms of all this data being turned over to the government without a warrant about our financial transactions, that the Supreme Court would say that's unconstitutional. I think there's actually a really good shot of that. At the same time, what we're seeing is we're at this moment in time where the governments around the world, but just speaking in the US, is really extending that mass surveillance onto cryptocurrency. So things like, a few years ago, there was the Department of Justice in the United States issued this cryptocurrency enforcement framework in which they actually said that any privacy coin, that use of privacy coins, and they explicitly called out Zcash, that use of any privacy coin was indicative of potential criminal conduct. And they said in that paper that mixers and tumblers were illegal and as money laundering. So that was sort of like an early hint. And then, of course, we saw the infrastructure bill in the United States, which has created this sort of this system where any transaction over $10,000 in cryptocurrency is supposed to be reported to the government with people's physical addresses. And by the way, just as a side note, that's supposed to come into effect approximately now. Like the 2024 tax year. So pretty terrifying. Obviously, Tornado Cash. What happened with Tornado Cash? Another instance of expanding this mass surveillance onto the cryptocurrency space. And another big one, of course, is just in the last month or two, Senator Warren introduced a bill that was intended to, really, it would kind of grind the entire cryptocurrency space to a halt, but it explicitly targets not just sort of cryptocurrency in general, but also targets privacy coins and privacy technologies, and says that all financial institutions, which also includes a very long list of participants in blockchain ecosystems under the bill, so validators, miners, all sorts of wallet providers, that all of those institutions, because they're redefined as financial institutions under the bill, which is its own problem, would be banned from interacting with technologies that enhance privacy. So privacy coins, mixers, tumblers, right? So this is a bill that has been introduced. It was introduced last Congress, and I believe she's probably about to reintroduce it in the coming weeks in the US, that would would have a massive impact on who could legally use in the United States privacy coins. And so these are really important battles. These are really important battles for financial privacy, for privacy coins in particular. But I think they're particularly interesting because it's a moment where, because the cryptocurrency space has this fundamental ethos of privacy, right, of caring about privacy, of caring about civil liberties, we have this moment where we can fight back, not only about the expansion of this mass surveillance of the traditional financial system onto cryptocurrency, which is itself a battle worth fighting, but also, in my view, we can go one step beyond that and actually wage a battle about the mass surveillance of the traditional financial system in general. So I think it's a really interesting moment in time, really important battles being fought. And I think a lot of work this year is going to be focused on, I think we as the Zcash community are really going to be at the center of a lot of these battles in the coming year.
Yeah, when I was kind of leading the regulatory relations effort over at the ECC before I came across the foundation, I recognized that there seemed to be the strategy of discouraging or kind of seeking to block, or I call it kind of de facto regulation or de facto banning of privacy preserving technologies. And it appeared to me that the rationale or the purpose behind that was to force people to transact using coins that don't have any privacy, and therefore could be then fully surveilled. Because as and when we deposit or withdraw funds from an exchange, the AML kicks in there at the on ramps and the off ramps. But it was clear to me that there was this kind of fairly, at the time, fairly subtle push to discourage the use of privacy preserving technologies. And it appeared to me that the rationale was to make sure that everything could be surveilled. I've got to say that since then, and in particular over the past few months, it feels to me like there's been a really, really significant change. JW, do you think that would you be up for taking the fight to the Supreme Court?
Sure. And I love, I hope from Marta's lips to Justice Gorsuch's ears. I hope. He's dropping hints that he's willing to curtail the third-party doctrine. So yeah, I think that's important. And I really, Peter's not here, but the work that Coin Center's doing is just amazing. And so really, really excited about the fights that they're bringing. They're bringing the right fights. They don't get as much press as the Howie stuff, but they're more important in a lot of ways. One of the things that worries me too is that I see coming down that I see in the future, that's both a problem but also an opportunity for Zcash, is that the IRS has 87,000 new agents coming on board. The IRS has a particular focus on crypto. Right now, their focus is John Doe letters to exchanges to harvest data and use it. And then the reporting is coming online. So that's their focus right now. But there's going to come a time when they get smart where they are going to start doing what they're doing with Venmo. And they're going to do it against crypto. And they're going to do ISP tracking. The reality is, look, every time you do a Bitcoin transaction, it's a capital gain event in the United States, which is an impossibility to Bitcoin's credit that it has survived and thrived despite the headwinds of that. But they're going to start doing some serious tracking here, and they're going to come and say, well, this public key transaction is associated with you forgot to use a VPN, so we caught you. That kind of stuff is going to come, and then the world is going to think, what's the alternative? And the answer is Zcash, right? So that's an opportunity for us, but it's also going to presage a fight. It's not to say you shouldn't comply with taxes, but it's also important for tax authorities to have compliable laws and regulations, and we're not in that place right now. And it's also the case that you have a perfectly legitimate right not to have a readily surveillable audit trail for the IRS. It should be hard for them to make a claim. They should do their work to make a claim of insufficient reporting or insufficient payment. They might like the idea of a free, publicly available audit trail of everyone who transacts in the economy, but we don't have to give it to them. They don't deserve that as a right. And so Zcash is a tool that can provide privacy in transactions in a way that it allows optionality of transparent or shielded, but in a way, also in a way now post Orchard and post Halo, where where the privacy challenges to having a transparent option are no longer as much of a problem as they used to be. With the million ZEC and the shielded pool, it's a very exciting time, and we're at a different place than we were in 2017. So I think we've hit that sweet spot. We really have, and so we'll be prepared. We'll be ready for, I think, mass adoption in the years ahead. So that's good news and bad news, I think.
Yeah, I think with the with the sort of ISP level surveillance, we're positioned well because the Zcash community grants have been funding work by Tor to build a Rust implementation of Tor that will be easily integratable into Zebra, and that will make it a lot easier for people to interact with the Zcash network over Tor, which will help with that particular challenge. But let's switch topics for a moment, and let's talk about Zcash itself. Now, obviously, both of you, came new to the foundation. So one of the things that I think has been, is really good with having you both join the board is having what's effectively a new perspective, an outside perspective. You haven't been involved in it since day one, like pretty much everyone who was on the board had been. So I wonder if you can tell us your perspective on Zcash, from coming in as an outsider, becoming now an insider, on the foundation board. What were your perceptions before? How have those perceptions changed? What has been surprising to you? And also, I think, why hasn't Zcash achieved more adoption than it has? We've got the best technology, we've got great teams working on it, but yet we seem to be lagging behind some of the other major cryptocurrencies. So why do you think that is? Let's start off there with Marta.
Sure, absolutely. So I have for a long time been somewhat adjacent to the Zcash universe, just in being a person who is working on cryptocurrency and civil liberties issues. Zcash is something that I've written about in blog posts for many years, and use as an example when I'm doing submissions to regulators about the importance of these technologies for civil liberties, that kind of thing. And so I was just really delighted to get to be part, really a deep part of the community. And in large part, my motivation there is I do think that this technology being widely adopted is something that is a game changer potentially for civil liberties. And I am concerned that there isn't wider adoption, and I am concerned about all of the battles that are being waged. Many of them, which we already talked about, which are very obvious and out front, but a lot of which are regulatory pressure behind closed doors, that really could potentially be things that are curtailing adoption, keeping us off of exchanges, right? Keeping Zcash off of exchanges, like a lot of what's happening is not even visible to us, I think, intentionally. And so I think that, when it comes to Zcash, one of the things that I really wanted to be able to focus on as part of the board. So first of all, is really the regulatory strategy, and how we are responding to this pressure and this, I think, enormously important time in order to make sure that people aren't chilled away from using this technology, right? Which is something that certainly will not help adoption. The second thing that I was hoping to bring is, one of the things that I've done as the president and chair of the Filecoin Foundation is really worked on the ways that you can really grow an ecosystem and a whole universe. And so I was really interested in working on those types of issues, like how we really grow the Zcash ecosystem, I guess more offensively, like as opposed to the defense we have to play on the regulatory side. First of all, it's been just amazing to be part of the community. And I think we have this fundamentally amazing technology and a lot, there's so much potential here. I think the way, Jay talked about, the way that the community is organized is very decentralized, and it's very cool to see all the different entities and groups and teams in the ecosystem. And I think in terms of challenges, I think we have some very clear usability challenges, or we have had in the last year. But even just in the time that I've been on the board these last few months, Zcash has gone from being difficult to use as a result of, whatever you want to call it, the spam attack, whatever it is, to having things like Zingo and Y-Wallet out there that suddenly are making it, like Zingo, the user interface, for example, just fantastic, like really like world class, and making really solving this problem in a way that makes it very easy to actually transact with Zcash. And I've met with community members in New Hampshire. I've met some in New Hampshire and have heard about how that community is, like just the number of people in New Hampshire using Zcash is phenomenal. And really hopeful that, after a short period of, I think, maybe somewhat curtailed adoption as a result of technical issues, I'm very hopeful. It seems like even just in the last few weeks with the Zingo wallet coming out, right? I think back on track for mass adoption, and I think that's so huge and so important for civil liberties. And I'm so happy to be part of the many people who are working to make that possible as a community.
Great.
You want me to?
Yeah, sorry. Do you want to respond to the same sort of question?
Sure. Yeah. I agree with Marta. Marta covered a lot of great ground there. So, if you'll forgive me, I'll make a selfish plug here. So I'm working on a book about privacy coins. That's part of how I came to this before I ran for the board. I've got a book coming out. It'll be a while. It'll be about a year and a half before it comes out with MIT Press. It's called Hide Money Using Crypto, Blockchain Privacy and Forensics. And it's about Zcash and Monero. I wanted to talk principally about three things, three tools that have vibrant communities, that have some pretty hardcore devs, that are serious projects in privacy. And I settled on Zcash, Monero, and the Bitcoin Samurai wallet and Sparrow as implementations of Whirlpool coin joins. And it's been fun, so I spent 6 months trying to start that project, and Zcash community was incredibly generous. At one point, I just cold DM'd Zuko on Twitter, and it was like, hey man, you don't know me, but I've got a draft. Can you take a look? And he's like, yeah, here's some comments. That's just Zcash community, right? That's how it works. And not that I know anything, but what I've learned to try to write this up is just from trying to study the two communities, Zcash and Monero, and how they developed, how they've come up. It seems to me that they came from the same place, the same group, going for the same thing, and it's just two kind of alternative universes that split off and start to grow in different ways. And one, Zcash takes the view wanting to get the shielded technology perfect, optimal, not perfect. I guess perfect's not a word we use, but optimal, optimizing the shielding technology, and willing to sacrifice usability and maybe scalability too, and focus on those later. Where Monero, went to war with the tool they had, and got some wide usability quickly in the battle testing of dark markets, where a lot of technology has always been first tested, and where the internet was first tested, and they've come a long way. Still, I think obvious, and the Monero community will admit this. At least the more thoughtful devs will admit this, that Zcash shielding, it provides better privacy than Ring CT. It just does. I mean, it's just a fact. It just leaks less information. But Monero is a really great product, and I'm hopeful that we spend more time with that community, interacting with the community. I know it's hard to interact with people when there's a lot of FUD coming toward us, and there's FUD coming from us to Monero. But once you just accept the differences between those two projects and the different things they're optimizing, realize we have a lot more in common than we disagree. I'd like to build more bridges with the Monero side. I'd love to have our Zcash people go to Monerotopia. I'd love to have Monero people come to ZCon 4, as long as they're willing to play nice and debate on the technical, and no FUD zone discussions. I think we can learn a lot from them. I would love to see, wallets are getting a lot better, so we're catching up a ton, and there's great work on that. We're close to getting getting the Ledger project done, and Hans got his marching orders on that, right? So that's terrific. That's all really, really important stuff. Another thing I'd love to see, Cake Wallet's got the ability to move to gift card, so you go back to fiat from your shielded, from your Monero, which is, I know some people kind of say, let's not worry about fiat at all, but a lot of the world that's going to on-ramp is going to want to go back and forth to fiat from private assets. So I think those things are useful to build too. So some kind of a gift card implementation in a wallet is something I'd love to see. That's a very specific idea, but I think these two communities have grown up in different ways, but it's important to study the differences. It's important for us to learn from each other. One of my favorite sci-fi shows is this show on Amazon about two universes that are created and split off from each other. The
Peripheral.
Yeah, no, not yeah. Peripheral is one of them similar to this. Okay. The name of it, but the idea is an alternative universe is created that's exactly the same, but then when they interact with each other, they start to change a little bit, and then 20, 30 years down the road, they start trading in information, because each one of them, they developed an oil field a little differently than the other one. So there's huge gains from information trade. I think that's the same thing with our two communities too. Huge potential gains from trading in information. So I'd love to see that bridge built out more, because we're surrounded by all the regulators, so we're in kind of the same boat. But yeah.
I think in the past there have been really some really good folks on the Monero side who contributed really well to Zcash. I think that's a relationship took a bit of a hit last year or the year before, and I think some of them withdrew. But yeah, I'm hoping that over time, hopefully those wounds will heal and we'll be able to rebuild those, because even today we have Monero devs commenting on the Frost specification and stuff like that. There's behind the scenes, the people who do the real work, who are actually getting their hands dirty with the code and with the cryptography, have got a totally different attitude to the people who are making a lot of noise on the forums and on Reddit and Telegram and whatnot, who aren't necessarily as collaborative and as positive. But yeah, I think as well that as we, ZSAs are now within sight, and which is huge. Like, it's the first significant functional change to Zcash since it was launched. We've had improved performance in terms of cryptography. We've had Orchard get rid of the trusted setup. But fundamentally, the Zcash that we use today, apart from performance improvements, just has the exact same functionalities it had back in late 2016. And with ZSAs, coming, hopefully You know, maybe we're going to see some movement towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. You know, I think I should really let John Akettit, you know, announce that sort of timeline. But you know, I think it's going to be a real game changer for Zcash, and it sets the stage for connecting with other ecosystems, connecting with other networks, and having assets that can move between networks. You know, there's no reason why a Filecoin or a Monero coin can't transition across and become a shielded asset on the Zcash network and benefit from Zcash's, you know, privacy preserving technology.
Jack, Zcash shielded Monero is going to blow some people's minds in both communities.
Do you think there's going to be some comments about that on Twitter later?
Yeah.
Okay, let me. Sorry, go ahead, Marta.
Or why you couldn't buy Filecoin storage with Zcash, for example, right? Like as an example, that's not just, you know, that that kind of interoperability brings a lot of potential new use cases for Zcash, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, yeah, it's a two-way street there. You know, when we start getting into those into those you know, moving assets between chains. One of the things actually that you know, I think is going to facilitate that. We have Christopher Goes from the Marta give a kind of presentation on this recently. You know, talking about there's already appetite in the Zcash community to move away from proof of work, and proof of stake is the obvious destination there. But one of the benefits that would bring is finality, and that helps when it comes to building bridges across multiple chains. You know, some other chains have got some interesting technology in this space. You know, one of the questions that was suggested on the forums, Marta, was you know, what's the status of the consensus mechanism with Filecoin, and should we be looking at looking to adopt that?
Yeah, totally. So Filecoin uses proof of space-time, which is its own consensus mechanism, and is fundamentally different from proof of stake and proof of work. I think that there's a lot of, just in general, I think there's a lot of really exciting overlap between the Filecoin universe and the Zcash universe. I think, you know, we use the Filecoin universe, we use Halo technology in Filecoin, right? So like it's there. These are two universes that I think have a lot of I don't want to use the word synergy. I really don't want to use the word synergy. I can't think of a better word. But I just don't want to. But anyway, so some word that's like synergy. These are two universes that I think have a lot of overlap. And you know, I really you know, for years I have done sort of had this vision of being able to buy Filecoin storage using Zcash and having truly private Filecoin storage. And Zuko and I have talked about that for literally years. And we've done a fireside chat where we talked about sort of the Filecoin universe and the Zcash universe. And we also did a big talk at Mainnet a few years ago. It was me, Zuko, and Vitalik, and talked about the ways, you know, both of us talked about that sort of interoperability vision and the ways in which that we think our ecosystems are really quite compatible and can build on top of each other, right? Like it's not like Monero and Zcash where it's like two you know, things that do you know, have the same kind of end goal, right? Like these are our ecosystems have different goals that are completely aligned, and you know, the whole purpose behind Filecoin was and has always been really to create a world where civil liberties are at the forefront, and to create a world where we don't have to live our lives through a couple of corporations that know everything about us. I'm really excited about the possibilities in Filecoin and Zcash, joining forces. So that's been one of my big pushes over the last few years, and another reason that I'm just so thrilled to be a deeper part of the Zcash community.
Has there been much progress on the hierarchical consensus framework that Filecoin's been working on? Do you know what the status is of that? I know it was kind of a research project, but I don't know if it's really progressed beyond that.
Yeah, so a lot of our focus in the Filecoin universe for the last couple of months, in terms of what we've actually been implementing, has been focused on the Filecoin virtual machine. So we launched that about 2.5 weeks ago on Pi Day, and up until Pi Day, that was the big push in our ecosystem, was launching the Filecoin virtual machine, which brings all sorts of really exciting potential uses of Filecoin to the forefront. So suddenly you have smart contracts on Filecoin. You have all sorts of really interesting applications that can really use data on Filecoin in a way that couldn't have been used before, and it's EVM compatible. So EVM, things that were built on top of EVM, you can suddenly use on top of Filecoin as well. So really huge. So that's been our major push in the Filecoin world, and it's been really shocking to we were sort of thinking, gosh, it would be great if there would be a couple dozen apps building on top of the Filecoin virtual machine, a few months out from launch, but it was like hundreds on day 2. So it's really been amazing to see how, and I think there are a lot of lessons for the Zcash community in that too. That was and for other cryptocurrency ecosystems, the FVM was a sort of community-wide concerted effort. We had a really, I think everyone in the ecosystem was really focused on how do we, launching FVM was everyone's top priority for quite a while, and very talented developers who made it happen, but really an entire effort of the entire community being aligned in one direction, and so far has been quite successful, though of course it's early days.
I'm gonna come back to that topic of alignment in the community, because that's something that I feel we maybe lack within the Zcash community. But before I do that, just sticking with the sort of consensus mechanism and proof of stake, JW, you've interacted with the SEC in the past, sometimes in a very interesting way, and one of the things that I've been kind of keeping a little bit of an eye on is the SEC's attitude towards proof of stake. And I wondered if you have any thoughts on whether there's anything that we, that we in Zcash need to be giving consideration to as we look towards the best way to move away from proof of work.
Yeah, it's not fair. There's a lot of gotcha games here, but one of the worst ones is the administration-wide position that proof of work, that's bad for the environment. Proof of stake, it's a legal securities offering. So it gets you either way, right? It's not quite sporting. The biggest risk on the staking side, of course, we've seen rhetoric from Gary Gensler that all staking is a securities offering, all crypto is a security, right? But I'm going to set that aside as just an unreasonable position and an unsustainable position in court. The biggest risk is custodial staking services that particularly, don't tell the SEC I admit this, but in Kraken's case, there was some decisions made that increased their risk, particularly. It was not only custodial, but they guaranteed returns at one point. So that increased the risk of what eventually happened. Now, it was unfair, absolutely unfair, first to have a $30 million fine for what's a purely no registration case. There's no fraud, there's no wrongdoing of any kind. To have a $30 million fine was ridiculous. And secondly, a settlement, I'm sure if they had given Kraken a playbook for here's how to register this program, they'd have done it. And they'd have rather spent $30 million on compliance and getting the registration up and running. But that wasn't an option. That was not given as an option. You can't register it. So just quit the product, destroy the product, which is also ridiculous. I don't think we have a ton of risk to consider in the move to proof of stake, as long as we don't have anything that's kind of custodial. I think like if we get if we can convince Lido or Rocket to support our staking, I think they're they're a lot safer place on how we risk. They've got some, but yeah, I guess the main thing is just to think about the minimum holdings required for a validator. Is it as big as 32 ETH, or do we want something more democratic and lower than that? I don't know. There's obviously some trade-offs that are going to be there, but one component might be the more democratized it is, the less semi-custodial stakers like Lido and Rocket are needed. I'd want to think about that a little more, but we're in a better place than the staking issues at the Coinbase and the Kraken level.
Yeah, like my own kind of initial impression, and this isn't something that I delved into deeply, is that making it possible for pretty much anyone to participate in staking by running a node and without having to go or without having to amass a large amount or take part in a centralized service feels like the better approach, feels like the less risky approach from a sort of regulatory perspective, and also facilitates decentralization. It means that you avoid this situation where like at the moment it changes a little bit, but pretty much 50% of Zcash mining happens through a single mining pool, and that's not ideal for any cryptocurrency. And I think it'd be great if as and when we move away from proof of work, we move towards a consensus mechanism that allows for widespread participation by pretty much anyone without having to have large amounts of capital to have. I want to go back to the topic that I kind of trailed earlier. So alignment, obviously this happened in Filecoin space around the VM. It feels like in the Zcash space, there's a growing alignment around ZSAs, but in other areas, it feels like there's constant debate, constant back and forth, constant disagreements and new proposals being put forward. And Marta, again, let's start with you. Based on your experience coming out, in the Filecoin space, how do you perceive the alignment within the Zcash community? We've got different entities. We've got which is good from a decentralization perspective. But if everybody's pulling in multiple different directions, and people are fighting one another and expending their efforts and their resources, to try and one up the other organizations within the space, it's not good for Zcash as a whole. So I wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from my perspective, from the outside looking in, I think, I think it's sort of like when people, please pardon this metaphor, but there's often, when there were all of the balloons, the unidentified flying objects, there were these conspiracy theories that they were put there by governments as a way of sort of trying to align us all governments around the world, all people across the world, to be against the UFOs, right? This is a common theme. Like when you have a bigger common enemy, whether it's UFOs or the alien invasion, whatever, right? That factions that otherwise would fight have to unite against the common enemy, right? And my view from, again, pardon the metaphor, but my view from both the outside looking in and the inside looking in is, I think that we have big battles to fight. I think we have big battles to fight first as the entire cryptocurrency community. So like when you're talking about the Monero, Zcash, whatever it is, like Monero, the Monero universe and the Zcash universe need to be united against these massive, the massive implications, the huge attacks, that really that both communities are under. Frankly, all privacy technologies, but especially anonymity enhancing cryptocurrencies, AECs, right? Which is what the government in the United States now calls Zcash, Monero, whatever. The AECs, now that we've been branded by the government, like, we need to stick together against this common enemy of this massive overregulation and regulatory overreach that's trying to effectively ban privacy coins, right? So we have, I think, this broader common enemy that we need to be united against instead of focusing on pot shots at each other, regardless of whether we're the ones who started it. To be clear, I'm not taking a position about whether who's right or wrong in the Monero, in any particular conversation in Monero and Zcash. So that's like at one level. And then I think within the Zcash universe, I think that it's really important that we have alignment, like that everyone in the Zcash universe is aligned against this, look, there's a lot to be said about a lot of different issues, but fundamentally, like, I think there's a lot of potential for Zcash. I mean, that's why I'm so excited about Zcash. There's so much potential for this technology that is as of yet untapped, right? Like, there's so much more adoption. There's so much more we can be doing as a community, and so much more use of this technology could have. And so I think it's so important that we as a community are united in making sure that we can push forward on that broader goal of adoption of our technology in order to, really defend civil liberties, like our broader kind of mission, right? And that doesn't mean we don't disagree with each other, right? That doesn't mean, like, in fact, a fundamental part of community governance is having different proposals, and like all of that leads to better, ultimate, the technology being better. All of these debates are really important, right? It's not that I'm saying we shouldn't disagree. I am saying, however, that any kind of us versus them mentality in the Zcash universe is totally counterproductive, because we are ignoring the UFOs, right? We're ignoring our actual bigger mission if we're focused on battling each other. And I think the time and energy that we need to spend is on these much bigger goals. Okay, end rant. Thank you very much.
JW, do you have a rant to rival Marta's?
No, I agree. I totally agree. I think you probably got more experience than I do, because you're already more in a community that's got a lab and a foundation, and I'm sure probably its own family discussions. Zcash is a family, and everything that means. And my family's perfect, right? We don't argue. We all argue all the time, and we all think that we're all convinced that we're right. But we love each other, and we have the same goal. And the Zcash community has one goal. And I haven't met anyone in the Zcash community who's not devoted to financial privacy. Privacy is normal, and devoted to Zcash. They just have different visions about how to help it grow potentially, but everybody's behind that same goal. And anybody who's interested in the short-term price of Zec is missing out. Is not really part of this community, because that's not what this is about. And those things will, the value of the thing will grow as a technology over time, but it's a long-term thing. And unless you understand that, then you're kind of missing the point. But yeah, this is a family, and so I'm just proud to be a part of it. I get to be with OGs like Marta and Zuko. I haven't met Vitalik yet. I'd love to get a picture of me hanging out with Vitalik while he's wearing a picture of Zuko, while Zuko's wearing a picture of Vitalik. But this
and then you can get that photo and have it printed on a T-shirt for you to wear.
That's right. Right.
Let's stick with you, JW. What do you think Obviously, you've been now, you've been, part of the Zcash Foundation now for a few months. I guess number one, was there anything that surprised you, based on your impressions before you joined, and then secondly, what do you think the role of the foundation is, going forward as we seek to decentralize the ecosystem, as we seek to, having two large organizations, is where we're at right now. The future, if to become truly decentralized, we need to have a lot more organizations involved, a lot more teams contributing to Zcash. How do you see the foundation's role evolving as we decentralize, and as we add more functionality like ZSAs, potentially programmability down the line?
Well, ask the new guy, huh? Where should we? That's a tough question. I hope that ZF continues I hope ZF continues its role, continues to do what it does. I don't see it needing to shrink. I just hope that its relative share of the pie decreases as other things grow by addition. But I hope it continues to do what it does well, focusing on long-term investments in cryptography research that accrue benefits to the Zcash community, either directly, like we're doing through Frost and Zebra, or indirectly through supporting of Tor, which is a tool that everybody in Zcash should always be using. So it's a little bit political talking point, but that's what I believe. I've still got a lot to learn about what we do. It's I hope I'm useful from the legal side. I do feel a little bit behind on the technical discussions because I'm not a coder, man. I've never coded anything in my life. So I hope I could be useful despite completely lacking that technical knowledge. But everyone's so forgiving of that and willing to explain and willing to be patient with me, which is a big help. And I hope that we continue to be kind of a big brother to the Zcash Community Grants program, and watch it grow and become independent, and hopefully not helicopter parent, as it develops its own legs, which it is doing. I hope everything we do has an international component, increasing international component, such that we are, I don't want to say ungovernable, but ungovernable, unstoppable by any one sovereign nation. And I hope we continue to, I hope the ambassadors program on the ZCG side continues to grow. It's early days for that project, but basically, I think every Bitcoin meetup in Africa or South America, we should have Zcash people there saying, up, wait, not private, but we're private. We need that heckler at every Bitcoin meetup in those continents. So I hope we can support that effort as well.
Yeah, we've just done a kind of a regional Zcon Voices event in Brazil, and Africa is one of the places that's kind of near the top of our list for the future. So yeah, expanding beyond and reducing our exposure to the United States as a regulatory and legal environment is definitely something that's very high up our schedule. Marta, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the Zcash Foundation plays such a critical role in the ecosystem. And I sort of uniquely understand the role that any kind of foundation needs to play for cryptocurrency, having spun up the Filecoin Foundation myself. I think for Zcash, a lot of what I see as the goals of the foundation are really growing and empowering the broader Zcash community. One fantastic example of that is convening the community together I'm so excited about ZCon. I think it's going to be so fantastic. And I think those types of events are, it sounds silly, but I think it's really critical to have those types of IRL meetups for the community, and finding other ways to facilitate that kind of community building, and also not just empowering the existing community, but also growing the community, right? Also making sure that we have a strategy around how we gain adoption, how we attract developers to our ecosystem, and also, frankly, a technical strategy. So I think those are all really important goals of the foundation. And one interesting thing about the foundation, which is not true of all cryptocurrency foundations, is that it's a 501c3, right? It's a charitable organization with a broader mission about really using this technology to enhance privacy, which we see as a fundamental human right. And I think that's, to me, that was one of the things that really attracted me to the foundation. I think as Jay said, like, this is really everyone I have encountered in the Zcash ecosystem has been really aligned on that fundamental mission. We may disagree about other things, may disagree about how to achieve that mission, but the fundamental mission, I think we're all aligned. And that, I think, is really, really powerful. And, one of the many reasons I'm really excited to be part of it.
Yeah, like I love it when we're able to do work that benefits both Zcash and the broader mission of privacy. A great example there is Frost. Like, Frost solves a key problem or challenge with Zcash, which is the ability to have multi-sig style transactions for shielded Zcash. That hasn't been possible until now, and hopefully by the end of this year it'll start to be possible. But that Frost has far broader applications, for privacy, not just in the financial sense, but in other senses across the technology sector. And I think it's great that we're in a position to be able to sponsor and lead that research. We're going to have other pieces of research that will be coming to light later this year around privacy preserving proof of stake, and hopefully programmability as well. But yeah, that ability, when we're able to find places where we can benefit both Zcash and the broader cause of privacy, I get the warm and fuzzies inside my chest, because I love that. Right, we're getting close, I think, to a natural conclusion, but I want to ask a really, really difficult question. So get ready for this one, okay? Both as from your perspective before you joined the foundation, and now with your perspective of having actually been part of the foundation now for a while. What is the one thing, the most important thing, that you think we should be doing better? So there's an implied criticism here, both of the foundation and me personally, and if any organization that I think that needs to improve needs to be able to say, yeah, there are certain things that we need to do better. So what is the one thing that you think we're not doing good enough, that we're not living up to our potential, not doing a good enough job for the Zcash community, and where we could do better? Not necessarily how we can do it, but just the one thing where you think there's a deficiency. But JW, I'm going to pick on you first.
Well, just internal communication, probably. So there's a lot of good things going on that I might learn about through a community call, and I'll be like, I didn't know we were doing that. That's cool. So sometimes that happens. So just learning, and it's the lowest priority, right? You're building stuff. You want to build stuff. You don't want to keep the members of the board. You don't want to do a briefing for the board members about what we've done the last 2 weeks. It's kind of a waste of time relative to. So I don't even know that that's necessarily the wrong choice. But maybe just internal communication, and then I think the community calls probably do a good job of external communication. Yeah, that's probably, and that's also probably just me being 2 months into the job is more likely. So I don't know, man. I think we're doing a good job. And I think at ZCon 4, we're going to hear lots of ideas about things we can do better anyway, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to ZCon 4. I think the focus there is going to be really on giving a platform for the broader community to start to contribute. So yeah, hopefully we're going to see a lot broader kind of set of people on the stage at ZCon 4. Marta, same question to you. What are we not doing well enough, and what can we do better?
Yeah, look, and I think to be clear, I think that is an important question that we should always be asking, and I think there's always an answer. There's never not an answer to that question, right? There's always things that we can be doing better, always. And for me, so I think the obvious one for me, so I, coming in the last few months to the foundation, one of the things I did was talk to a lot of community members to try to understand what do people care about right now? What are people thinking about? And the number one thing was the spam attack. Again, whatever you want to call it, people call it different things. Reasonable minds can differ about what was going on, what the problem is there. But I heard from a lot of community members that that was the number one thing on their minds. A lot of them said, look, the technology is not usable right now. Fundamentally, again, this was a few months ago, and that they had stopped onboarding. There are people who had been proselytizing Zcash with their friends who would use it really quite regularly and onboard people constantly, and said, they would say, I stopped onboarding people because it's not usable right now. This was something that I think, I heard a lot of concern about from the community, and I, also heard a lot of consternation from community members about why is this not being solved? Why is this not our highest T0 top priority, all hands on deck, everything else is dropped until we get this fixed, right? And I know there have been, and I also heard from community members frustrations over, there were zips that were proposed, there were a zip that was proposed to, as a solution for this, and, the fact that process is a slow process, which may just be inherent to community governance. So what is the foundation's role in addressing that, right? Versus other community members in the ecosystem? Obviously, that doesn't necessarily fall on just the foundation, but I think this is a thing for the broader Zcash community. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I do think that, I personally have used Zingo, and I think it's, and Y-Wallet, and both have, from what it seems, really made it so that it has become much more of a non-issue. But I know the underlying issue sort of is still there. And other wallets, Nighthawk and others, writers, still I think are having issues, if I understand correctly. But I will say, I think two things. One is, I think we still have a little ways to go before we put a bow on it and are done with it, and it's wrapped, and this is no longer a problem. So I think that's just something for us as a broader community to move forward on. And then B, I think there's this bigger picture, retrospective on when something like this happens in the future, how are we, what are we going to do as a community to make sure that it's something that gets resolved quickly, right? That it isn't, that it doesn't drag on for a long time. And look, I don't know the answers, right? This is a big, I'm new here, right? So I'm sort of pointing out a problem without a solution, but I do think there's a variety of different, I have a variety of different ideas for the ways in which we might organize ourselves, to be able to really prioritize something that's, really, that a lot of people see as a high priority, and to put aside all the other noise and be able to prioritize better. So anyway, that is all. Again, I'm new here. So like, please excuse me if any of that was like wrong or objectionable, but you know, just from listening to the community that are members of the community, that was sort of my takeaway from the first few months that I was here.
Yeah, I think with hindsight, you know, we expected that the issue would get resolved, you know, quicker than it obviously has done. And as we at the foundation don't run a wallet, we don't, you know, Zebra doesn't have an actual wallet yet. You know, we implemented ZIP 317. You know, there's I don't think there's any controversy about that, about implementing that ZIP. You know, we implemented it in Zebra, and then, you know, kind of I guess continued on our work with Zebra. And with hindsight, you know, I think when something like this arises, you know, maybe we need to be more proactive, because I think, you know, we did say, hey, you know, if there's anything we can do to help, let us know. But that maybe we should have been, you know, a bit more proactive with jumping in and saying, right, you know, I know the ECC guys have been working really, really hard on this. Maybe we should be more proactive by jumping in and saying, right, guys, what can we do to help? We're here. You know, we're at your door, ready to help. And this actually also, I think plays into something that I've been thinking about, you know, for a while, even before I joined the Zcash Foundation, is the concept of a Zcash core engineering team or development team. You know, like we talk about Bitcoin Core, you know, there's a bunch of different developers who work for different organizations, you know, or who are paid by different folks, and you know, they work together, and they focus on key issues, that are key problems that Bitcoin needs to get resolved. And I think that, you know, in times of crisis, you know, shall we say, you know, maybe we in the Zcash ecosystem need to be adopting a similar approach. You know, we actually did this recently when Alborn announced their the sort of potential service attacks on a whole bunch of coins, which included Zcash. And, you know, we had foundation engineers, and we had ECC engineers, and we have Taylor, you know, who's the kind of security expert at large in the Zcash ecosystem, all kind of, you know, pulling together, working together, you know, contributing, you know, different ideas and perspectives, and just doing, like, even doing small things, you know, that you know, didn't necessarily contribute to the technical solution, but just made life easier for everyone. And I think that, you know, when we face something like this spam attack, I think maybe we need to mobilize like that more in the future. You know, it's a tricky one, you know, to kind of figure out when the right time is to do that. But with the benefit of hindsight, and obviously, you know, 2020 hindsight is a huge benefit. I think it's fair to say that if I could go back and do it over again, we would probably adopt a different approach.
Right. And notably, like, it's not on the foundation. It's not like, this is sort of the fundamental part of like being in a decentralized ecosystem, right? Is it's not like there isn't the Zcash Incorporated that, you know, can go into an executive meeting and decide what its OKRs are, whatever. Right? Like, this is fundamentally the issue in like a place where responsibility is dispersed, right? So it's not like it's on the foundation, or it's not like it's like the fault of the foundation or any one particular organization or whatever. But I think, and also it's not like it necessarily, you know, like, it's not like we have to necessarily look at it from like a hindsight perspective. But I think just like, okay, now having gone through, still going through, but having gone through that, what are the ways that we can organize ourselves as a community? Like, this is like a problem for the entire community. And like having a core devs group is exactly what you're, like a perfect example. Because fundamentally, like, not only is it not on the foundation, but I think that like this type of thing has to be able to, we have to, like, when I say it's on the community, what I mean is like, this is an open source project, right? Like, fundamentally. And we have to be able to, as an open source project, like prioritize among ourselves and figure out multiple different paths that we're going to take to approach the problem. Like, we can't just be all sitting back and waiting for one particular group to be solving it within the right. Like, we need to mobilize as an open source community. So I think this is about us as a community, not the foundation, not any particular organization, but like, really, how do we as a community deal with these P0 problems? And just thinking of ourselves as any other open source project, how do we do that?
Yeah, with the added issue that fundamentally at times we're talking about people's money being at stake, or people's privacy being potentially under threat. So yeah, I think that point about diffuse responsibility is a really interesting one, because in traditional corporate and whatnot settings, you're usually able to point at someone who's responsible, whereas here we're all responsible, but at the same time, we need to step up and accept and embrace that responsibility. We can't just be focusing, okay, well, Zebra's fine, so we're not gonna, we're not gonna be worried about it, or my wallet's fine, so we're not gonna, we're gonna use this as an opportunity to grab more users or whatever. It's very much a case of taking a more collaborative attitude, I think, and I think we need to figure out different ways of doing that as we grow and as more people come and join us. I think we're coming to, sorry, JW, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I totally agree. One idea I heard someone mention was maybe we should do some kind of in addition to Zcon, maybe like a quarterly family call where it's ECC and ZF and ZCG and maybe a few people from the advisory committee. I don't know, whatever the workable number is. And we do a call together and talk and communicate in a way that it's hard. I mean, I try to read all of the Zcash community threads I can, but there's so many, it's just hard to keep up, which is a good thing, but maybe we can get something out of that communication that could be helpful. I think there's going to be a great privacy awakening in crypto users. There's going to be a day where, and this is not going to be fun for a lot of people. There's going to be a day where they get this letter in the mail from the IRS. It says you owe $10,000, and you're like, wait a minute, on my LP, the stuff I LP'd on Uniswap, how do they know about that? Oh, they do know about that. And guess what? Because of impermanent loss, there's actually nothing really in there anymore. But I don't get to use that loss because it's not realized. But they say my staking rewards are taxable income. Oh, what do I do now? This is why we Zcash. So a lot of people are going to have to learn the hard way about Zcash. So when that day comes, when that great privacy awakening comes, we got to be ready with, and we're working on it. But my wish list for Christmas, I want Ledger shielded, right? I want a wallet that does what Nighthawk is cool with the side shift. I can buy the whole cycle of me buying Zcash is non-KYC from side shift straight to, got to use a VPN to use side shift, but you can do that. I want a gift card so I can if I want to use my Zec on something and not have to use Spedden Flex it, which is cool, but I want to be able to have something like Cake Wallet's gift card option for to go back to fiat. I want shielded by default, which some wallets are doing now, but we gotta have it. We gotta have it for the low information user. So we got to be ready with that and seamless syncing, and all of it, and using Tor by default in the wallet, the way Samurai Wallet does. I can probably keep adding to that list, but that all needs to be there and locked and loaded for that oh shit moment that's going to hit so many people one day. That's coming, and that's the future of Zcash. Unfortunately, I don't like that, but I think that's eventually how we get widespread adoption.
Yeah. And along the way, we're going to be adding shielded assets and the ability to swap shielded assets within Zcash, which I think will be a real game changer as well for all this talk of decentralized exchanges that aren't really decentralized at all. And then my own personal sort of hobby horse is the programmability stuff, which I think is on a longer time horizon. But I think that once we figure out how to do that in a way that's scalable and private, you know, we could see Zcash become a whole different animal. You know. Well, listen, we're nearly at the top of the hour. We've been doing this for a while, and I think we've reached a logical conclusion. So let's leave it there. Thank you very much to Marta Belcher of the Filecoin Foundation and J.W. Verret. Forgive me, is it George Mason University?
That's right. Yep.
Yes, I got it right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service as part of the Zcash Foundation board. And for everybody out there watching, go and Google ZCon4, go to the Zcash Foundation website. You'll see some information about ZCon4, which is going to be happening this summer in Barcelona. We're going to be in Europe this year. And yeah, keep an eye out also for more community calls. Follow us on Twitter, Zcash Foundation. And yeah, we'll see you again soon. Thank you all. Good night, good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are.